everyone, you're watching the Superhero Show with Daniel and Chris every Saturday here on IGN. Now, this week we got our first glimpse of Josh Trank's take on Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four.
Finally.
I know, we've been waiting for a long, long time, and we got a kind of a decent 2-minute trailer.
Yeah, it wasn't the teaser that we kind of thought it would be, like the Star Wars teaser. This is 2 minutes of dialogue and action. And...
Yeah, so we've got a really detailed Rewind Theatre up on site where we get into the nitty-gritty and how many times we see that experiment.
Daniel's gone to town on it.
Yeah, I wrote a 2,000-word essay on it.
If you want to know about Kate Mara's hair and how it changes colour, watch this Rewind Theatre.
Yeah, I think that's a major plot point in that movie. She gets more and more blonde as the film goes on. But we wanted to talk about, obviously, our initial reaction to the film.
Yeah.
And maybe trace some of the influences that are at work in Trank's take on it.
Yeah.
So what was your initial thoughts on it?
I thought it was really good. It was better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
I think we were fearing the worst because... It's 6 months out now and we hadn't seen anything.
Not even a still, an official still.
I thought it was a very effective trailer. It was a lot more serious than I was expecting.
Yeah.
I think we knew it was going to be a more serious take on the characters, but I don't think we realised it was going to be quite that.
No, I didn't. I wasn't expecting that kind of very, very hard science approach to it. I think.
Yeah.
Like it very much the VO in the trailer. Seeing the laboratory, like the particle accelerator, is very much. This is a science fiction movie. I think.
They still look a bit too young to me, the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, the dynamic's different if you make them really young, I guess.
But I like those actors. Nothing I saw in the trailer made me think, oh, I don't want to see, that person playing that character. Yeah. And it set things up quite nicely. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, again, I was expecting the worst, and now I'm kind of hoping for the best. It's much darker. And the thing is, we're going to get onto this now, I guess, is because it's a more realistic take on what are, I always think, quite light-hearted characters, what that means for the rest of the movie and the overall tone of the movie.
Yeah.
Because I think once you strip away the wisecracks and the levity of the Fantastic Four, and you actually think about what's happened to them, the changes they've undergone, it suddenly takes a much more darker edge to it.
Well, he's been big on Trank and Kinberg have been big on talking about grounding it in reality, and you really got a sense of that from this trailer, didn't you? These aren't superhero suits they're wearing, they're containment suits trying to contain these powers that they can't control.
And something quite monstrous is happening as well to them.
So they did some interviews in the run-up to the trailer breaking, and one that was really interesting was I think it was with a website called Collider, where Trank was saying that if it was in a video store, he wouldn't actually expect this film to be in the superhero section. It would be in the sci-fi or the horror section. So as you say, it's much more hard science. And I think what we were surprised by was the amount of... that it felt like a horror film. It felt like the setup for a horror film.
Yeah, and obviously it's just hinted at in the trailer, but I think particularly what happens to Doom and the Thing will really be milked for the more serious we're kind of treading on a subgenre of horror here, which is known as body horror. Which is how big in the late 70s, 80s, how it impacts the kind of malleability of the human form. Particularly people like Clive Barker, David Cronenberg worked within that subgenre to great success.
Yeah, and we had a couple of quotes that in the same interview that Trank said. He said, I'm a huge David Cronenberg fan, and I always viewed Fantastic Four and the kind of weirdness that happens to these characters and how they're transformed to really fall in line with more a Cronenbergian science fiction tale of something horrible happening to your body and it transforming out of control.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And they've gone the science route, in the comics originally it was space. This time
cosmic rays,
they've gone, we believe that they're going into, what's it called? The nether
end zone, the negative zone, which is
negative zone.
So I think in the trailer you see little Reed Richards creating this little homebrew experiment where he's teleporting a little car, and it seems throughout the movie he gets more and more funding, and eventually he's doing this from the military.
Yeah.
And in the Rewind Theatre we kind of posit this theory that they maybe don't all get their powers at the same time. And the structure of the movie might be different characters going to the end zone at different times, undergoing these changes, maybe rescuing other characters. And I think there's this idea of teleportation, and this is maybe where he's factoring in Cronenberg, and particularly the movie The Fly, is if you teleport and you maybe get it wrong, get the coordinates wrong, you might fuse with something else.
It's molecular fusion, isn't it?
So in Cronenberg's The Fly goes into the teleporter with Seth Brundle. But maybe this is like, I don't know, maybe they teleport into a rock. I know that sounds very crude. Maybe that's what happens to Ben Grimm.
I thought that was a really interesting idea you had, having watched the Rewind Theatre, that, he's fused with a rock.
The geology of this end zone.
And it makes you wonder why they didn't then cast the Rock rather than Jamie Bell.
Natural.
No need for CGI. The man's a rock.
And then the other thing we're inferring maybe from the trailer is you get very small glimpses of what could be Doom, and he looks like he's kind of metallic. He looks like he might have even fused with the machine or the suit himself. So again, this idea of like your body turning against you. Yeah.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
And that's something that Cronenberg's explored in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Actually, right from the start of his career, the really hardcore horror up to, the more mainstream ones like Scanners and, like you say, The Fly. I think it's a really interesting idea, and if you look closely or you watch the Rewind Theatre, he does look Doom-esque when he stands in the machine before they take off.
Part of the containment suit has this kind of mouthpiece which is metallic.
Yeah.
Could become part of his body. And as soon as I started like pursuing that kind of line of inquiry, I immediately thought of one of my favourite scenes at the end of David Cronenberg's Fly, where Brundle is trying to bring Gina Davis's character into the teleporter with him. So he wants to fuse with her and his child, and it's really messed up logic. And he ends up fusing with the machine itself because of some kind of mishap. And you see him, and we're not going to show it, it's a bit too horrible to show at this time.
Come on, Rich, show a little bit.
And he's fused with machines, so it's this kind of inorganic fusion, which is typically Cronenberg.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe what they're doing with Doom, I think.
Yeah, so
which is hideous.
Do you think we could see Brundlefly being the villain in Fantastic Four Part 2?
I think that's what's going to be happening. I think that's bits of them are going to be falling off, and weird stuff's going to be happening. In the ultimate take on Fantastic Four, Reed Richards loses all of his internal organs. He becomes just one massive stretchy substance, which is horrific. If you put that in real world with an actor and state-of-the-art special effects, that's actually quite scary, I think.
Well, if Trank's going off to do Star Wars after this, we could have Cronenberg coming in directing Fantastic Four.
Imagine that.
I don't. Do you remember that a couple of years ago? He wasn't very nice about superhero movies.
Yeah.
He's not got a lot of respect for them. But I would say that The Fly is a superhero movie. A lot of his films are. Scanners is a film about people getting superpowers.
There's only just 237 scanners in the world or something.
That's good. Good knowledge.
Yeah.
Did you Google that?
Yeah. But what do you think? Actually, kind of the question we didn't talk about beforehand is, if this is going to be posited in the same universe as Fox's X-Men movies, what do you think about that? Do you think it looked like it could one day dovetail with them based on that trailer?
Well, it's in the real world and it's in the modern times. But as Kinberg has said, it's happening at the same time as these X-Men films are happening. And so for the X-Men to have not acknowledged that these people exist, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the problem.
Yeah.
And he said, so that's a problem that he faces and they face, but they're obviously having those discussions. Yeah. There's no doubt that the idea would be for Fantastic Four and X-Men to team up. Everyone you ask about it involved in these films won't say it, but there's no doubt based on the success of the Avengers. Plus, it makes sense and it'll be fun. Yeah. It's something we'd want to see.
And I think dramatically, it's quite cool what they do in the trailer. It almost sets them up as a nice counterpoint to the X-Men, where that's a natural mutation. It's part of the natural physiology, where the Fantastic Four in this trailer is something that's forced upon them.
Yeah.
They're being transformed in quite a violent way.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an interesting kind of opposite.
But is there a worry there'll be no humour in this film whatsoever? Having gone from a very humorous Fantastic Four, which is what the comics are. And I think they've talked about this film, it won't have the tone of the comics. It'll be in the spirit of the characters, but without maybe that kind of jokey, playful tone.
Yeah, I think the biggest cause for concern right now is the ages of them, and you mentioned this earlier in the show.
Yeah.
It's just, otherwise, why do the Fantastic Four rather than you could do this idea with unique characters if you really wanted to. Trank did a superhero movie before that was original characters
and young characters.
Yeah. I think Fantastic Four, you have to play up that family dynamic to some degree, whereas this is like a bunch of young friends.
It is,
which is a very different dynamic.
Yeah. But what the trailer got me excited about is the fact that we're talking about having seen a lot of superhero movies now in the last 10 years, and some of them being a bit repetitive and feeling like we've seen it all before. And what was nice last year is we had the conspiracy theory thriller in Captain America, we had the science fiction in Guardians of the Galaxy. And what if this is as horrific as we think it is, and this is just us projecting.
Based on some quotes and not early footage.
It's all speculation, but I think that's a really cool route to go down. Down a slightly more scary route about, gaining these superpowers. It
distinguishes it.
What it does to you psychologically as well as physically, and it could make for a really compelling movie.
Yeah, definitely. So Chris and I are both quietly optimistic about the new Fantastic Four. We'd love to hear what you think, so email us at superheroShow@ign.com. But until next week, for all your superhero needs, DC, Marvel and all the rest, stay right here on IGN.